This video is sponsored by Squarespace. The first video I published was this one 3 years ago, and since then, many people have asked me many questions like, how do you make these animations? What software do you use to animate videos? Okay, I hear you. I'm taking this opportunity of me reaching 100,000 subscribers to do this Q&A video as a thank you, and also letting you know me a little bit more, like how I loved math in the first place, or my opinions on the current math education system, or maybe even how to start a YouTube channel. But we start with the most popular question of it all. How do I make the animations? I'm always too embarrassed to say that I use PowerPoint to make almost all my videos, including this one that you are hopefully still watching. What I mean is that you are watching a PowerPoint presentation recording, and what I put on the slides are either made from online LaTeX equation editors, that's the mathy font that mathematicians use in their papers and whatnot, or in the case of diagrams or graphical animations, I use GeoGebra, a very powerful graphing software. While GeoGebra is incredibly powerful, this animation shown on screen right now is not made using GeoGebra, but Mathematica instead. Using GeoGebra to create something like this would be very painful. So Mathematica is useful when it comes to my complex analysis video series, but for everything else, I just use GeoGebra because of the cleaner visuals. So PowerPoint, GeoGebra, and Mathematica are the softwares that I use for the animations, and in particular for PowerPoint, I also use it for all the thumbnails. Prior to this video, I wrote in my channel description that I didn't want to say what I use to make videos because the video making process is in no way professional and I don't want people to judge me. And with this video, the secret's out, but I still hope that people don't judge me for using PowerPoint. If you want to learn more about how to use GeoGebra to make these animations, I've written 2 blog posts about this on my website, which I built quite easily using Squarespace, the sponsor of this video. Squarespace allows you to build websites easily. For example, if you want to have your own blog, Squarespace has an inbuilt blogging editor, so you can just click on one of these templates to start. Just having texts in your blog is quite dull, but you can add images or videos easily, so you don't need to be tech savvy to have a professional looking blog. But if you want to level it up, in the case of my blog post where I want to showcase some of the GeoGebra applets and lets you interact with it, you can also do something like that in Squarespace as well. You just have to select the embed option, then insert a block of code for the GeoGebra applet there. If you want to try out the blogging feature or generally just want to build your own website, you can now go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/mathemaniac to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. In what follows, I'm grouping the questions in 3 main batches, but starting with my math journey. What made you fall in love with math? Several people have asked me this question, and the answer is simple. Watch this video. Essentially, in 4th grade, I was given this question. If you have a square of side length 4 and another square of unknown side length, then what is the area of this shaded triangle? Back then, I discovered a very slick way to do this, detailed in this video, and that made me really love math. And since then, I borrowed books like Prime Obsession by John Derbyshire, which talks about the Riemann hypothesis, and 2 recreational math books by Ellie Maurer. Then it became a positive feedback cycle. By exposing myself to more math, I fell deeper in love with math, and this makes me seek more math. Fast forward to university education. Someone asked, do you go to Cambridge? Well, yes. I made this video with Tom Rocks Maths, which you should check out after this one. And here's the complicated thing about math in Cambridge. First off, in Cambridge there are different names to different years of your degree. The first year is called Part 1A, second year is Part 1B, and guess what is the third year? Part 2. And the fourth year is part 3. Weird, right? Anyway, in the British education system, most bachelor's degrees are only 3 years as opposed to America's 4 years. This means that the fourth year is actually optional and will lead to a master's degree. This fourth year is where I'm at right now. On that note, what's it like studying at Cambridge? Is it really demanding? This is my Google Calendar for a week. Here, all the lectures are in the morning, and on average, you have roughly 2 supervisions per week. Other people might call them tutorials, and in part 3, it's slightly different, called example class. This might not look that demanding, but you would be utterly wrong. The work you need to do for supervision takes up more time than you imagine. Luckily, Cambridge terms are only 8 weeks long, so you will have a very hectic 8 weeks, but then you will have a break. A typical Cambridge year looks like this. There are 3 terms, each lasting 8 weeks, and 2 breaks in between them, each roughly 6 weeks. Only in those 6 weeks do I have the time to make videos. Tori F asked, are you more of an applied or theoretical math person? Now this really highlights my math journey in uni. To illustrate that, I'm listing all the first year courses here. Guess which one is my favorite? It's groups, a pure math course talking about group theory. You may have guessed that because I made a video series on group theory. Now what about the second year? These are the courses that I have taken, and guess which one's my favorite? It's geometry, another pure math course, and it is about differential geometry. So I was still a relatively pure person in second year. However, all courses were interesting and my interests remained quite broad. My third year courses were still all over the place, including both pure and applied courses. But my favorite is the general relativity course, so applied that it is physics now. So yes, I transitioned from pure math to applied math or theoretical physics. The reasons behind this transition are complicated, but one of them can be found in this Twitter thread that I wrote. John Chesant asked, are you planning to enroll in a PhD program, and if so, what field of math will you specialize in? The answer to the first part is yes, and for what field of math to specialize in? It's on early universe cosmology, which sounds more physics than math, but at least in Cambridge, things like theoretical cosmology do indeed lead to a PhD in math. So, wish me luck in my PhD applications. So these are some questions about my math journey, and now let's go through some of my opinions on math. Praful, a Patreon supporter, asked me this rather long question, but let's go through this first part. How happy are you with the math education system? Well, there are 2 parts of the math education system, the pre-uni one and the uni one. The pre-uni one, I'm not a big fan of, while for the uni one, I can't comment much because there are way more variations than the pre-uni one. My main gripe about the pre-uni math education is the focus on computation. The example I always give is the volume of the sphere, because a lot of people can probably recite the formula for it, but most might not be taught where that formula came from. Of course, there are more examples, but this is my go-to. The problem is the math taught is so computational that when I told my friends that I'm studying math in a uni, their response might be, oh, do you just add bigger numbers? This just highlights the problem that the general public sees math as an equivalent to computation, which makes them hate math. But what is the solution? I hate to say, but I don't know. It's such a thorny issue. A university, especially popular ones, receives so many applications a year that most likely they have to rely on some automation for at least the first round of screening. And to do that screening, you have to use something like grades to summarize an applicant. And you know what that means? You have to take some test or some form of assessment to get a grade. If you need an assessment to quantify a student, for math at least, you most likely turn to computations in the written test, basically testing whether students can use the quadratic formula or something like that. So I think the main obstacle is this chain of consequences. And to solve that, you either have to change the format of assessment, say a math project instead of an exam, or even just avoid this problem altogether by making math not compulsory. Basic level math, sure, compulsory, but higher level ones not necessary. You would think that as a math lover I wouldn't say this, but a lot of people truly don't need these in their daily life. Sure, they have applications, but most people really don't need to care. I think that forcing people to learn a subject that they don't like just makes them hate it. So maybe consider the possibility that this kind of computational math aren't really for everyone. But are these really the best solutions to the problem? I don't know. Anyway, this is only the first part of the question. The second part starts with a quote by Vladimir Arnold, which says, "Mathematics is a part of physics. Physics is an experimental science, a part of natural science. Mathematics is the part of physics where experiments are cheap." Honestly, I'm not quite sure how the parallels are drawn, particularly in regards to experiments. Perhaps what he meant was that you have a conjecture you want to prove, and you are currently here, then you try to experiment with different ways to arrive at the conjecture. But that feels very different from experiments in natural sciences. So I'm not sure how that came to be, but the final part of the question is quite interesting. Is it a shame that physics and math students are not taught enough math and physics respectively? Well, for me, I do attend these physics courses in my math degree, and there are many more in third year that I haven't taken. So I'm sorry that I can't relate to this, but it is definitely true that for some branches of math, knowing some physics helps and vice versa. For example, for Green's functions, it helps to know a bit of electrodynamics. After all, Green himself invented it by thinking about electricity and magnetism. On the other hand, for physicists, it helps to know a bit of group theory as well, because particle physicists use Lie groups and Lie algebras all the time. Alright, next question. Favorite theorem? Hands down, it is Theorema egregium, Latin for remarkable theorem. This was discovered by Gauss, and it is a fundamental theorem in differential geometry. This was demonstrated on Numberphile using pizza slices, so I don't want to repeat it here, but let's just say that the more you understand the theorem, the more you understand why Gauss called it remarkable. My second favorite is Gauss-Bonnet theorem, another fundamental theorem in differential geometry. The way I would describe it is that we could tell the difference between a one-hole and a two-hole donut, but for a very small creature on the surface, they don't really know which surface they are on. But if they are allowed to wander through all the surface that they live on, even though at any point they don't know where they are, if they aggregate all the information collected, they can tell the difference between the two. Again, the more you understand the theorem, the more you understand how beautiful that is. Well, that's just me really loving differential geometry. Honorable mention, period 3 implies chaos. Let's say you repeatedly apply a recursion scheme where you take f of the previous term, and the function f is continuous, so for instance, rx times 1 minus x for some parameter r, and it sends the interval ab to itself. Then if it happens that there is some xn, such that if you apply f to it 3 times, it goes back to itself, then the system is chaotic, in the sense that if you nudge the initial value a little bit, you get a very different behavior. This means that a 3 cycle, which is something very orderly, tells us something about chaos. And I think this is quite beautiful and unexpected. Perhaps I ramble on too much about my opinions on math, so let's go on to answer some other questions. Cliff, another Patreon supporter, asked, mathematical definitions are, for the most part, consistent and standardized. Some authors deviate slightly on occasion. How did this happen and why does this phenomenon continue in practice? Well, first of all, I'm not that informed why exactly that happens, but I can speak from experience why I think that happens. Convenience. Different fields of math deem certain definitions to be more convenient. One good example is the Fourier transform. Don't worry if you don't know about that. The point is that we have this pair of definitions with a and b being some constants. But for different fields, different pairs of a's and b's are used. For example, 0, 1 is used in modern physics, 1, -1 is used in pure math and systems engineering, 1, 1 is used in probability theory, -1, 1 is used in classical physics, and 0, -2 pi is used in signal processing. The thing is, in all these different conventions, there are advantages and disadvantages. If a particular convention is good in case A, but bad in case B, and in your field, case A appears way more often than B, then the advantage really outweighs the disadvantage. In Fourier transform, these considerations are often quite minor, like the disadvantage being you need to add a factor of 2 pi, but it makes it less convenient. A few people asked me to recommend books or resources. The thing is, Cambridge is very heavily reliant on lectures, and I practically haven't touched a textbook for my degree. The only exception is this visual complex analysis book, which I use almost purely because of my complex analysis video series, not for my degree. So unfortunately, I can't recommend anything here. If you want to replicate the lecture experience in Cambridge, then any Cambridge math student can tell you Dexter's notes. But honestly, lectures aren't the most important part of the academic experience here. Instead, it is those supervisions which you can only experience here if you are a student, unfortunately. Maximo asked, is there any way I can help with subtitles in Spanish? Thank you for thinking of doing that, and the full process is detailed on my webpage FAQ section. Next question. What makes me start this channel? As some of you might know, I used to have a Quora account. Quora is another question and answer forum, and there are a few answers I wrote that to this day I'm still proud of, and some of them actually turned into videos on this channel as well. This is to say that I was quite passionate about sharing my love of math, and whether it is Quora or YouTube is just a way for me to do that. But there is a trigger. That was when my friend and I joined a math academic research project, and I was very proud of our result, so much so that I wanted to share with the world about this. The best way to reach a larger audience seems to be YouTube, and that's why I started this channel. But hang on, if that's the reason, why haven't you made a video about that project? The idea was that I wanted this video to be seen by as many people as possible, just because I'm very proud of the project, so I keep making videos to grow the channel. But here's the thing, the more experience I have with the YouTube algorithm, the less likely it seems that this hypothetical video would get many views anyway. So I don't know, maybe this video will never happen. What will your advice be to someone who is about to start a new educational channel like yours? Well, first of all, just do it. I think a lot of people stress over their first video, but the truth is, most people's first videos are bad, including mine. It takes time to hone your skills in video making, so just experiment with the first videos and see what works. Another thing is, don't give up, which sounds cliche, but for this channel, I started uploading in May 2019, and it took 10 months of weekly uploads for me to get to just 300 subscribers. But you can see what happens later on, so don't give up when you see almost no progress on your channel. These are just my 2 cents. Honestly, if you want a more qualified person to give you advice, you should watch this video series by Tom Scott. For this Q&A, I received more than 100 questions, so I could not possibly answer all of them. And for some questions, the answers can be found on my website, which is again built using Squarespace, and you can get 10% off your first website at squarespace.com/mathmaniac. As always, like, subscribe, comment, share the video, and I will see you next time.